there.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about intentioning. Obviously, power is very important to you. Power too. I know you don't like the phrase women empowerment because you feel that we already have the power. We don't need to be granted it. So tell us about your thought process and what really is at the heart of this book, Intentioning.
Well, I will do that, Jennifer. And I want to kind of step back for 1 second and say that when I started writing Intentioning, it was before the pandemic. And I had in my mind that I wanted to create 9 new leadership intentioning tools for women to help them advance in their careers and achieve their highest and best intentions. And then when the pandemic disrupted all of our lives, I realized that it had to be a bigger, broader, and I think actually a richer book, because we had not one but 2 pandemics, as everyone knows. We had the coronavirus pandemic, then we had the pandemic of racial injustice, which has been there since the beginning of our country, but finally people were beginning to see that it was there. And those 2 together created the most massive disruption that we have had. And I have always had the belief that disruption is the opportunity. The disruption requires you to think new thoughts. It requires you to let new ideas into your mind. And that's true for individuals, but it's also true for our institutions. Organizations are organisms, as it were, and it comes from the same root word, and their boundaries can get very rigid. And they were designed by men for men. The institutions that we have now were designed by men for men, mostly white men, who had women at home doing the work of the family. And that is no longer functional. So I had to really step back and really put a broader framework around it. And we saw how countries led by women were actually doing better in the pandemic. So I wrote a chapter on why leading like a woman is now really good for everybody. And so that's how the book then took shape. So there's that context of the pandemic, the power of disruption. It's disruption and rebirth. And the rebirth is up to us, how we make it happen. And then the value now in being a leader who is a woman, who has been socialized, I should say, as a woman, because gender is a social construct. It's not hardwired. It's not that women or men are better. It's not that, and gender can be very fluid these days. But the point is that the socialization that women have had has now given us superpowers that are the reason why companies with more women in their leadership make more money, and the reason why countries with more women in their leadership have done better with the coronavirus. So that's a big nutshell, but that's the nutshell of the whole book. And then we have the 9 leadership intentioning tools.
Well, I think it's a great nutshell. And with the 9 leadership, the intentioning tools, it takes up an entire second section of your book. And I think that they're great. And what I would love for you to do is to walk through these tools for our attendees, to summarize them and to tell us a little bit about these tools, because you're saying that these tools, this is what's something that we can take and allow ourselves to power to get into those leadership roles and look at this disruptive time as a time of opportunity. So if you start with whichever one you want to start with and just walk us through it.
Okay. The first thing I want to say is that these are probably not tools. If any of you went to business school, you probably didn't get this kind of message in business school. I pretty much had to learn about leadership on the job. And so what I have done is really distill the things that you don't learn in training that you get for leadership. There are things that you can learn in many different places, whether it's business school or whether it's taking workshops and courses. You can learn how to budget, you can learn how to do strategic planning, you can learn how to do HR, you can learn how to do all of those things. But what you don't get taught are some of the kinds of tools that you'll learn in intentioning. And they break down into 3 different, I guess you would say, buckets or categories. The first one is the self-definitional tools. these are the things that we need to know, because great leaders know themselves. Great leaders know who they are. They know what their values are, and they show what their values are. So I'll unpack those three in just a moment. The second group are the counterintuitive tools. And those are things that sometimes you've been told not to do. And I've learned from the school of hard knocks that actually they are sometimes the very thing that will advance you in a surprising way. And then the third group are the change leadership tools. The leadership intentioning tools that enable you to change systems, whether the system you're talking about is a company that you work for or that you're creating, or whether it's a system like legislative issues or public policies of any kind. In the self-definitional tools, the first one, which was really where you have to start, the first one is uncover yourself. Any of you know the definition of covering it from the psychological sense, if that's something that you're familiar with? And basically it's, we all do cover in some way or another because we need to fit in to whatever culture we're in. But because women, and particularly people of color, are working in institutions that we did not design, very often we cover who we really are. And we're afraid sometimes to show who we really are. So uncover yourself. I tell the story in that tool of Debbie Sterling, who created the toy for girls, the engineering toy called Goldie Blocks. And she found that as she was starting her company, that she tried the leadership techniques that she had seen men using, and it didn't work for her, and she wasn't happy. And she worked with a coach to help her be more true to herself. And she's done really well since then. But the reason I included her story is that when she was in engineering school, she was one of very few women in her class. And the professor humiliated her in front of the class by making her answer a question publicly and then deriding her publicly for not having answered it correctly. And then asking the rest of the class, should she get a grade? Should she pass? And she ran out of the room crying, and she was followed. The good news is a male student followed her out and persuaded her not to drop the class. But it was in that moment that she realized that there had been so few girls and women that she had ever seen who were engineers. And she wanted to do something to help girls learn the joy of creating. And so then she created this engineering toy especially for girls called Goldie Blocks. So that's the first one. I'll go through the rest of them more quickly, but that's just an example of how I tried to weave women's stories into the book, and told a few of my own too, because we've all got our stories, right? And so the second one is Dream Up. And basically it's, if what you're aiming to do, if your intention isn't scaring you, it's probably not big enough. So think about it and then think bigger and higher. The third one is Believe in the Infinite Pie. And thank you, Jennifer, for talking about the difference between power over and power to, which is where I start. When in the traditional narrative of power, it's a finite pie. It's a scarce resource. It's assumed that if I take a piece, there's less for you. Well, the fact of the matter is that, especially in an economy that's based on brains, not brawn, that there's no limit. There's no limit to human intelligence. There's no limit to our creativity, our love, the things that matter in life. There's really no limit. And so while we have been socialized to think that we have to hold on to our little bit of pie or whatever it is, in truth, the more there is, the more there is. And the more I help you, the more we both have. And so believe in the infinite pie. And I have to confess that metaphor for me came from my having won a charity chocolate contest, chocolate making, chocolate, whatever it is. So I made a chocolate cheesecake that won the prize. And people started saying, oh, do you give away your recipe? And I was thinking, who would hold on to a recipe? I mean, who would hold on to that little bit of power or knowledge? And it just didn't make sense to me. So that's where I got that particular metaphor. So those are the first three. And Jennifer, I could talk about the rest of them, but we may want to move on. You tell me what you'd like me to do.
Well, one of the tools, for lack of a better word, that I really felt would resonate with Ellevate is social capital. And and the reason why I think it works well with Ellevate is because you write, you need to build social capital, quote, because relationships are everything and will ultimately help you as much as educational qualifications or work experience. And this is a key essence to Ellevate, which is a group for professional women based on networking. So if you could go a little bit into social capital and also talk about how it complements networking. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but you had mentioned Selena Sue as an example here. And I think that she is a wonderful example. So first off, can you talk a little bit about it? Because I think it ties in with what Ellevate does and the woman that you wove her story in to exemplify this particular tactic.
Jennifer, I have to credit you for this particular tool. And I don't think I ever told you this, but you introduced me to Veronica Dagher, and I was on her podcast. And it's about women and money. And she asks a question at the end about what is your money tip for women? Well, I am the person who never thought about money. I thought about it, but I was, the happiest day for me was when there was automatic deposit of my paycheck into my bank account. So I didn't even have to go to the bank and put my money in the bank, because I'm very goal driven and very mission driven. So it's like, I don't want to think about those niceties of life that you have to think about. So when she asked me that question, I realized I hadn't prepared for it. And I just blurted out what to me is the absolute truth, which is build your social capital first, because it will be what will get you where you want to go. And you can learn everything else. You can learn anything else that you need to know. But if you don't know how to make relationships and sustain relationships and understand the strategy of the importance of those relationships for everyone in the organization from top to bottom, to know who you are, what your abilities are. The homophily, as they say, is the biggest predictor. The who you're sitting next to basically in your life is the biggest predictor of what will happen to you in your life. And Selena's story is very interesting. And I wanted to put it in this chapter because many people say, well, but I'm an introvert and I don't like to network, and I don't like to, I don't like to have to deal with that.
Oh, I hear that all the time, Gloria, especially from women, correct?
Yes. And actually, one of the things that the pandemic has done, of course, is isolate us even more. So it's even more challenging to make sure that we have those relationships throughout any organization that we're working with, so that people know who you are, what you can do. And as Carla Harris would say, who will carry your paper when you're not in the room? Who will talk about you? Who will say to other people what your capabilities are when you're not there to speak for yourself? So, but Selena says that she is actually an introvert, and she had to learn that's really okay. That's really okay. But what she does is she is able to connect people, other people. And she's literally built her whole business around helping other people connect. So, and learn how to build that social capital, because she has had to go so deep to try to learn it herself. And yeah, I think that it's a very fitting story. And it is, I think we're probably all introverted at some point or another.
But we need to get out of that introversion, so to speak, and build that social capital. Now, the other methods that you mentioned in your book is Modulate Confidence. I love the next one, is strike your own damn balance and cover your stress. Be unreasonable, turn implicit bias on its head, and clang your cymbals. Now, today's audience, today's attendees, we're very focused on intentioning now, because as we know about the she session and everything that's happening with COVID, Should we focus on one intentioning tactic, or do we have to use all of them to achieve our leadership goals?
Yeah, the point of having 9 of them is that you have a toolkit. And at any given time in what you're working on, you may need that particular tool. You may not need all of them at once. They do intersect quite a lot. So it's good to know them all and have them in your back pocket to use as you wish. And if you, there are actually exercises that go along with each one of the tools. And I created a workbook that has all of those exercises collected in, if you go to my website, gloriafeldt.com/intentioning, you can download that workbook for free. And it enables you to, I think, get the most value out of those tools because it gives you some practice exercises for utilizing them. And then once you get them all in your mind, that you'll pull them out, that there'll just be moments when you'll go, oh yes, well, I'm not going to wait until I'm confident to do this. I think there's a whole industry. I'm glad you mentioned that one particularly, because there's a whole industry around trying to make women more confident. Well, if we were totally confident, what would we ever do? We'd be so happy. We'd just be sitting here and just being whatever we are. It's that little bit of a burr under the saddle that actually gets us to want to learn more, do more, aim higher. And if I know for myself, I knew nothing in my first CEO job. I had never run anything. I didn't know anything about the organization. I don't even know why I said yes when offered the job. And I broke out in hives every day for the first month because I was so nervous. And if I'd had the confidence that I saw a lot of my male colleagues had, by the way, I probably wouldn't have done as good a job. I always find I do my best job when I go into it without already knowing the whole thing. So.
Oh, absolutely. And for those on the call, Hannah has been dropping links in. And for the link that Gloria mentioned, Intentioning Gloria Feldt, the link is in there. So you just need to click on it, just scroll down a little bit, and then you can download the work plan. It also tells you more about the book. And with our last question, we have a couple of minutes left. And I want to shift gears a little bit because you have said, not you have said, but everyone has said this is such a disruptive time for COVID and how, it's terrible for women, et cetera, et cetera. You've been on Good Day LA, you've been in Forbes, and you're saying that this can be an opportunity for us. And you're one of the few people, if not the only person, who's saying that this could be an opportunity for working women to rewrite a lot of the stale rules and to move forward ahead. So can you expand upon that the next 3 minutes or so?
Well, let me just point to the fact that in public policy right now, for the first time, we are talking seriously about childcare as infrastructure.
Never
and
before.
Caregiving as infrastructure. Now, we may not get it in a robust way in this initial, but I'm going to tell you the fact that there is that public conversation would not have happened if it hadn't been for the pandemic, if it hadn't been for the fact that companies have now invested a lot in female talent. And with the She Session, they're going to lose. They know they're going to lose. They need to be able to make it possible for women to come back to work. Men have now seen that being at home with children all day and being their teacher is not so easy as they thought. It's not just kind of like not working, right? It's a very important thing. And so honestly, if sometimes I ask people the question, if women had created the institutions that we're working in, what would they be like? And I think where we're headed is because of the disruption, we can literally rebirth everything, rethink everything, retool everything. But these moments in time do not last. Yeah. You have to take them when they are there. So that's my intentioning, is that we will take this amazing moment and we won't make it perfect because it never is, but we will have more opportunity now than we've ever had. And I really believe that, that by enabling everyone, men and women, to have more flexible workplaces, that in turn will enable women to move further faster.
Oh. Well, from your lips, Gloria. Well, thank you so much. These 30 minutes just flew by. I have a whole slew of questions, so maybe we'll have you back again. But
Anytime.
in the meantime, we're going to open up the floor. Hannah is going to take questions from the audience. And unfortunately, I have to hop off. But Gloria, I know you're like 10,000 times busy. So on behalf of Ellevate and the attendees, thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge. And I was looking at the attendees, and a lot of them were taking notes as you were speaking. And so thank you all, and have a lovely day. And I hand it back to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Take care.
Bye, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have our first question. Teresa, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, good morning, Gloria. Thank you so very much for this presentation and for your book. And the one thing that has happened, I am in academic settings. I'm a dean here at Princeton University. And the one thing that I've found in a lot of organizations is that they've hired a lot of Black and brown women, especially after this year. And they've placed Black and brown women into leadership positions. And what I've seen to their detriment is that it's not that these women aren't talented or gifted, but the culture is not, the organizational culture hasn't changed to support these women. So what advice would you give, and how to support, what's the best way to confront culture, organizational culture? I know you talk about it a little bit in the, I can't wait to get your book, but just raising this up.
Yes, well, that's a great question. And thank you so much for asking it, because I do worry about that. And often the women are put into like certain siloed, like you're going to be the director of diversity, right? Right.
Absolutely.
Hello. I mean, this needs to involve everybody. Again, it is both a challenge and an opportunity. So the first thing I would say is that believe in the infinite pie and make those relationships. Everybody needs their support system. So as soon as there's more than one, there's an opportunity to have a support system and to really gather together and have a way of supporting each other and maybe even coaching each other, peer coaching for each other in solving the problems of the day. And actually this past year, Take the Lead did add a program to our leadership development that we have for women. It's called Creating a Culture of Inclusion, because we could really see that until you're tackling the culture as a whole, you can make progress, but it's going to be more difficult. I have always believed that the progress has to come both top down and bottom up. That it's about the skills that we have and our courage to go ahead and push the envelope a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, the real impetus always has to come from the top. So I'm just going to say, for myself, as somebody who has been a CEO for a very long time, one of the things I always most appreciated was people who would come and talk to me and tell me the truth. Mm. And so I think that some truth telling that offers solutions, it can really help, because probably they have good intentions. Assume they have good intentions.
Absolutely.
Assume it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much. I've been in that position for 6 years, but as new people join the organization, it's just been interesting to see.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm envisioning that, in another 10 years, it will look completely different. So good for you, and stay optimistic, stay intentioning, and, keep the faith, because it will happen. The change will happen.
Thank you.
If I could add a comment to what you were saying about intentions of having people tell you the truth or what have you, from that standpoint, I think that it's important. I went through a horrific experience this past year of a company I built up, and it was, anyway. At the end of all of it, it's taken me 9 months to really realize, when people come and tell you the truth, it doesn't matter what their intentions were. Their intentions were to get me out and not pay me for what I did. It was my responsibility to figure out how I took that information and empowered my new intention to say, okay, you watch me. I came, I was there, and I will be back. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's something that's important to also understand. It doesn't matter what someone else's intentions are. The information is still important to take, process and then go back out with it.
Great point. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah. More questions? I love the question part. This is the best part.
Hi, Gloria. I do have a question. I'm sorry, I didn't see the raise hand button. To build on what Teresa noted, and also to add on my own experience, I'm a woman of color. I graduated recently from my Ivy League school. I graduated from Columbia. I'm in HR. And we were asked to show up intentionally or within or who we are. And as an individual, I'm an introvert extrovert. It takes me, I'm someone that takes a look at the room. I try my best to understand the players in the game, and I absorb, and then I make any necessary changes, step or actions in regards to socializing and communication, just getting a strategy at hand. I do feel that, and most people look at me like I'm crazy, but other people that have been in the Ivy League institution as a woman of color understand that being confident, one, and being educated, well-educated, has been a ding as opposed to a step up the ladder. People have the assumption or look at me more so of, and this is my most recent job because I just graduated, as someone who either one, thinks that she's a know-it-all, which I'm not. I come from a startup background, but these are assumptions that are given before even having the opportunity to meet me or having that opportunity to work with me. And at times I am still building my confidence in my position and who I am. But I know who I am in regards to how I work, how I deliver, and how I execute. Like everyone else, there are opportunities and I welcome feedback. However, before I enter the room and are able to build those relationships, I feel that having that particular degree or that experience is a negative, as opposed to you go for it. This is someone that has experience or coming with a different information from a different mindset. So how do I combat that going into the room?
Well, that's how I actually created take the implicit bias and turn it on its head and make it your superpower. Because again, we are who we are. Now, all women, and in particular women of color, walk a two-edged sword in any situation, and that's it. This has been a fact. If you appear powerful, you're too powerful. That scares them. It's breaking the gender stereotype. And it's breaking the racial stereotype. So you don't get treated as nicely. If you were a man and you walked into the room with those same traits, it would be cheers, right? It'd be all cheers. Yeah. Okay. So there's that side of the sword. And then the other side of the sword is if you don't exhibit that power, you're considered not able to do the job. So you start with a two-edged sword, but I really believe that has enabled us to do a few things. The metaphor of how a woman's mind can keep many tabs open at the same time. It's true. We have been, because of the socialization we've had, we can think a lot of different thoughts at the same time and we can multitask really well. And so our challenge is to take the implicit bias that is in the system and figure out how to turn it to our advantage. And it's a relationship building, I still think, is probably a big part of it. If there are people who are reacting to you in a way that is not how you think you're showing up or how you want to be perceived, try having coffee with them. Try making sure you understand them and who they are and where they're coming from, because often when people react negatively to us, it's coming from their own negativity, their own insecurity, and their own fear about themselves. So you're on the right side of history here, and you're also going to change history by being able to build those relationships, or putting energy, I guess, into building those relationships. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting. It can really tire you out. But so don't let it tire you out. Just do what feels right to you at any given time. But I think I would focus on get to know who those people are. Ask them questions. Be the person who's expressing, showing empathy, and asking people what their issues are. And that's going to open them up a lot more to who you are and have them appreciate much more who you are. That would be how I would deal with it. Open to other suggestions, but that's how I would deal with it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Gloria.
Yes. So I have a question for all of you. If you don't have another question for me, just in the couple more minutes that we have, I'm very curious to know what your biggest insights have been during this pandemic time, or what is an insight that you have gotten during this pandemic time? If anyone wants to share that, I'd be really curious to know.
I think for me, one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is that, like, this is going to be one of the most unique, powerful, and I think consequential events in in kind of our lifetimes that we might see. And there's actually something, kind of powerful about that. It's like most of the time we read about these things in books, but this is the type of thing that's going to go down in history. And I know, as difficult as it is, and as much as we can feel in the trenches all the time, there's something about that helps us to understand, like, we're part of this bigger system, makes moving forward easier. And I don't know, for me, it's helped me take some more decisive actions. And, I did some things to blow up my personal life and like professional life in a really good way over this last year. And I think there's, still figuring that out. We're still in the midst of it, but I found that has been something that's helped drive me forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Michelle, yes, Susan.
Gloria, thank you for all of this. It's a special place right here, right now. And I think we're in special times right here, right now, as you said. Virtually all systems are being dismantled in some way or being looked at, and the opportunity to rebirth. What really got me going is you're saying take the moment because it doesn't last.
Yes.
That is, it just sends chills through my entire body. It's it's like, don't die with your music still in you. Well, now is our time. All the things you've been writing about, and you've been the proponent of, and all of us who are trying to ride those coattails, get past the fear, get past the inner barriers. It's enough. It's our time, and to bring in this the power. And you described it before. In fact, we were talking to Talia about creating the relationship, the social capital. We need to be those people who bring empathy to the workplace, who to create spaces of conversations where you're inspiring the empathy shock that happens when we have conversations at deeper levels that normally conversations would not take place in the workplace. Particularly about people's lived experience around racial justice, around what it's like to be different, to be the other. I think all of these opportunities to bring into corporations will help this disruption, will help dismantle and shift the culture. I could go on forever, but I sort of, thank you for leaving this space. The connectedness, the truth of who you are, and people having each other's back. I think those are my, big takeaway.
Well, thank you for pointing out for having heard what I said about you have to take the moment when it's there, because as somebody who's been in social movements all my life, it's so easy to get mired in the difficulty, the grief, the sadness, the whatever is going on, and not see that, oh my gosh, we're going to look back on this time and we're going to wish we had A, B, C, D. So let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah. Thank you. Would you have a question, Michelle?
I was just going to add what the pandemic has done. It has allowed me to completely reconfigure and imagine my time management. Of course, I don't have young children. I have 2 grown sons who moved back home, but I don't take care of them. I don't have elder care, but I do not commute. I do not travel. I do not get dressed up. All of those things take time. And I took that's several hours a day. That could be 4 hours a day of not commuting and not doing all those things. And I've taken that time to pursue the other kinds of professional aspirations I have, like continue to write more books. And yeah, so it has allowed me the freedom to create what I want to do with my time without those logistical concerns. So yay for virtual.
Yeah, no kidding. Yes, I wouldn't have finished intentioning by now if it hadn't been, honestly, for that exact same thing. It's like I'm not spending time driving places or flying places or or blow drying my hair. I mean, I did this for you all this morning. I did blow dry my hair and put on makeup and all that stuff for you. But I have yoga pants on under it, and I'm going to the gym right afterwards. So. Absolutely. I mean, we joke about it, but it really is true. And it's, I'm curious how many of you are working, so your offices are back. People, you are either in your office or they want you in your office. So Teresa, you're one. Okay, Hannah, you're one. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be about 50-50 at this point. And it's going to be interesting to see what's happening a year from now.
It'll be interesting to see how often we all go into the office, because right now I'm doing once a week. And, as Michelle said, yay for Zoom. It's been just revolutionary for my business. I have all of these new clients that aren't from New York because I've been referred new business, and people are happy to talk to me over Zoom from all over the country, which is really interesting. And then I also, have a new baby at home, and I'm able to continue to build my business because I can log in after she goes to sleep at night, and I don't have to deal with the commute. So while I am going in once a week, and that's a great mental health break from just being home, it's been so helpful to not have to skip a beat as a new mother.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I've heard it from a lot of people that just being able to have lunch with their kids has been a real treat. I don't know if that remains a treat always every single day, but at least some of the time and for a while. That's certainly true. Yes, Sarah.
That's one thing that I like, looking at the balance of having parents being home. I think that, we as a society shifted from having, which was traditionally the stay-at-home mom, which ran the household, which had things balanced, which had, all of those things. And primarily when women were in the workspace, they were teachers. And they thrived as teachers, and they elevated, no pun intended, but all pun intended, they elevated the students that they taught, and they were hard on them, and they were in science and math. And that's where they really, really scaled. Then when that started to shift and more women started to go out into the workplace, it destabilizes the home life, and this is where, like, sometimes the feminism conversation gets very treacherous. Sometimes I think is that people say, oh, well, no, we should all be working, mothers, it doesn't matter, or we should all be, one way or the other. I think that it's just understanding the balance that someone needs to keep the things bolted together at home, and everything else runs much, much smoother. And that's one of the things with the pandemic, is that I think that, as you had mentioned, both moms that work way too hard or way too much, and dads being there, seeing that balance in their children's life, I hope is going to be a reset of what you can do going forward. And congratulations on your new baby. That's as a successful working woman, you will always find that push me, pull me, and you just have to figure it out. And my biggest fear when I had my children, and I think I was interviewing my 9th nanny, and my best friend looked at me and said, why don't you apply for your own position? I was like, that's crazy. It was the best thing I ever could have done. But now we have the opportunity to do things more on a virtual level. So again, I'm sorry that was a little long-winded, but it will be interesting to see how things balance out in the home life with our children, because that's going to be something that will be the next generation. And developing both boys and girls mindsets of stability within your home. It doesn't matter who creates it or whose role it is that's broken up, but it's extremely important to then be efficient outside of the home.
Mhm. Well, I would just add one thing to that, which is that our system now has not been conducive to people stepping out for a while and then coming back.
That was my biggest fear.
One of the changes that needs to happen is for your career not to be truncated because you stepped out for a while. And again, this should be true for both men and women, because you stepped out for a while, whether it's for caregiving, or you needed to go back to school, or you needed to have some kind of other break for your own mental health, or whatever it might have been. There's no reason why. We have very long lives if we're lucky now.
Mhm.
And there's no reason why we can't have a system that enables us to step out if we need to for a while, and then step back in when we're ready to. And of course, you'll have to learn new things, you'll have to build new relationships, but you should not sacrifice your whole career if you decide to take time out because you want to be at home with your kids for a few years.
What I said is I took a sabbatical.
You know, I was speaking to a business class, though, the MBA business class, and one of the male students asked me the question, "What do you do about these women who take vacation?" And I said, what do you mean? He said, vacation, like maternity leave. Like, no, we have to like change the whole mindset. We have to change the whole definition of this. And that's why it's like, not having babies is nothing new in this world. It's just that we need a new way to incorporate having babies and growing and nurturing our children in a society.
How did you respond to that when you said it's not a vacation, it's
yeah,
breeding life?
I attempted neither to laugh at him nor to be angry at him. I attempted to give him a carefully considered answer. And actually, I asked him to explain more about what he was talking about so that the whole class saw how ridiculous it was first. And then we talked about how pretty much what we were just talking about, which is that it's not a new thing for people to have children, and our systems right now do not allow us to nurture our children and have our careers successfully. So we need to revamp all of that for everybody. Yeah,
Very good work.
Thank you. We try. And just to put in a small plug here, we do really good work. Michelle is our editorial director, and she writes a wonderful newsletter. So if you go to taketheleadwomen.com, you can sign up for the newsletter. And Michelle has great tips and tools and information and articles every week. So.
And I shared the link with you in the chat earlier, so you can scroll up.
All right.
So, Gloria, you had wanted to give away a copy of your book.
Right. Yes.
So can you please pick a number between 1 and 9?
Okay. I will pick 7.
So that is Thalia.
All right. Thalia, I'll be mailing the book. You'll need to let Hannah know, or you can just email me, gloria@gloriafeldt.com, and you can, so I have your address, and I will gladly send you a book. And for anybody else, if you purchase the book and you want it signed, given our virtual world, I do have book plates. So at any time you can just email me and I'll be happy to send you a signed book plate.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming here today. Another plug for anybody who is not an Ellevate member to please consider joining our group for more interesting events like this one. And anybody who's not an executive level member to also consider becoming one. I know most people here are executive members, but we did invite some special guests here today. Thank you so much, Gloria, for your time and your amazing insight on intentioning. And we look forward to reading the book and learning more about it.
Thank you, Hannah, and thanks everybody for being here this morning. Appreciate it with your smiling faces so early. Have a great, wonderful day.